Welcome to another edition of Top Lines and Tales. This week we're sponsored by Harbro, manufacturers and suppliers of quality livestock nutrition. I'd like to welcome to this week's Top Lines and Tales podcast one of the most familiar, respected and successful names in modern cattle breeding, Neil Massie from Blelack near Arboyne in Aberdeenshire. Neil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Andy.
And Neil, I believe you first came to Blelack back in 1967. And
my father was a rubber planter in Malaysia, and he was there all his working life. In fact, he had the company of the Japs for 3 years, and he was a lucky man to survive that. But he was always keen on farming, and my mother came from farming stock. In fact, she was left a small farm at Kintore by her father, and that's where I started off before I moved to Blelack in 1967.
And what size of farm is Blelack?
The Borough farm at Kintore, which I had, was only 130 acres, but when we came to Blelack, it was 600 acres. But Blelack, when I got it, was not in very good shape. It had no fences and only one shed, really, and so there really wasn't much. In fact, my friend Stephen Mackey came with me to look at it, and after I'd looked around, he said, "Are you really sure about this place?" So we bought it, what would now look to be very, very cheap, of course. But it's a move that I've never regretted. It's very much a stock farm, although it grows quite good, molting badly. But it really is a stock farm, and that's what we've used it as over the years.
Move on to the stock then, if we can chat about the famous Aberdeen Angus herd. I think started in the early 70s with a couple of cows from Canda Craig dispersal.
Yeah, it wasn't so much the dispersal. I really couldn't afford the dispersal ones. I got a couple of old cows from them that were really not going to the dispersal, and that's really what we started with. And then we then went down to the Little Dean sale, and there we purchased about 20 odd lots, which is really about almost half the sale there. But it was a herd. The Little Dean herd was a very interesting herd, really, because they had, at the time, most Angus breeders fostered their calves. They didn't foster, and the cows were all very natural cows. Their great thing at Little Dean was fat stocking, really, for Smithfield show, which they won on quite a few occasions. So when we bought all these cattle, the farm manager there at the time was a Scotsman. He was very interested in us getting the cattle away up to Scotland. So that was where we started, really, and that's why we bought those cattle, because they were very natural, very milky cattle.
And I'm right in thinking Tom Brewis was probably the only other main buyer down there at the sale at the same time doing similar things.
Tom was buying there at that sale. In fact, it was quite funny, because the auctioneer was from that area, but Rolly Fraser was down assisting, and when Tom Brewis bought his first lot, the guy turned to Rolly and said, "Is that man all right for the money?" Which was really quite amusing, because Tom at that time was one of the leading breeders in the country, without a doubt.
And both of you, of course, went on to be leading breeders, and some of those animals would have put a backbone in your herd for a long time. And the Canda Craig, I think, the descendants could still be there until
oh yes, they would
recently,
be, yes.
Anyway.
And certainly there were a lot of the Little Dean ones played a prominent part in the development of the herd, really. Sure. But then the following year, we went up and we bought a heifer at the Ballaville dispersal. And she's maybe been one of the real successes. She was an Evora, which established our Evora line, which is probably the best known line in the herd now today.
And that would just be a year or two after that, would it? Still in the early 70s?
Well, that was the next year, more or less, I think. If I remember rightly, it was just about the next year. But I was going away on holiday at the time and missing the sale, and had to put Ian MacDonald, who was my stockman at the time, up to buy the animal. Right. And I think we paid $5,000 for it, which at that time was quite a lot of money,
It would be,
But she has been the backbone of the herd, really.
When they're the right ones, they're never dear. That's what they say, certainly.
Well, that's right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if we move on to the Charolais herd was added, I think, in 1974, would that be right? Can you tell me a bit more how that came about?
Well, I was always keen in the pedigree stock, and I was very friendly with Maitland Mackey at Western at the time. They, being entrepreneur kind of lads, had brought in the Charolais when they started off. But as he said, he wasn't really a pedigree stockman. They were kind of running with their dairy herd, and they were almost in the way. And he sold them really very, very cheap to really get them moved on. So we had, I can't remember how many there were at the time, 12, 15 cows or something like that. But I remember that I went down to a sale in Edinburgh the next month or something. Ernie Dodd, whom I'd never met before, was introduced to me, and he offered me more than twice what I had bought for the cattle unseen, which I very nearly took, I may say, at the time. But thank God I resisted it and kept them.
Of course, and Westertown would have been, well, they would have been one of the very first herds, and the Mackies were the very first ones to bring the Charolais into the country and had to fight very hard to get them in and registered, I think.
Well, that's right, yes, but not that would have been Jimmy Mackie's Bent's father, but they would have been more the people did that. And Anderson Abundant was very enthusiastic about the job at the time too. But we were in quite early into the job, not the first lot, but the second phase really. I remember getting invited to go to one of the buying things in France by Bobby Robinson. That was a real eye-opener for me and really got me interested in the Charolais job. At that time, he was chairman of the Charolais Society. So he was really, he became a very good friend of mine over the years. So it was, I really enjoyed that. That gave him a real interest in Charolais.
Sure. We'll go through those herds in a little bit more detail, but I also recall you telling me you had a few Romanolas for a while, wasn't there?
But I do remember I had Romanolas. I wouldn't say one of my more successful ventures.
I remember you saying that you thought there was a market for them in Canada when you went into them.
Yeah, well, but I don't think that materialised. As I say, I don't think that was one of my brightest moves.
You did go to Canada, didn't you? Maybe a little bit before the other breeders started going out.
No, I wouldn't say I went before because John Graeme was before me, and Tom Brewis and John Moores all went out before me, and Willie Robinson from Nightingale. But I did go out quite early, and I bought my first one in 1977, I think, when I went out to Regina. And I was amazed by the whole thing, and I was really taken with the cattle. And I bought this bull at auction, actually, Skillimano Revlon. And I also bought a couple of heifers from them that day, too. One of them, which was proved to be very good. But Revlon was an excellent bull. Not huge, but big by the Scottish standard at that time. And I remember Jock Campbell of Wedderley and one of the Graemes coming up and looking at this beast and studied him for a little while, and then eventually one of them said, "I'm going away home to mend my fences in case this gets out." But he proved to be a very successful bull.
Yes, you said he went on to be very successful with you at Blelack, but you weren't long before you were going back there again for your next.
Well, I was back in 1970. Well, I went every year. I got my friend Bob Lane by this time. We went to Canada in the autumn and really had a very enjoyable time. But in 1979, I went back and I'd heard about this bull, Wilmo Powerhouse. And I went into the yard, but he hadn't arrived. And when he did arrive, I was horrified because the beast hadn't been clipped and he looked like a Galloway. But by the time they got him smoothed up, he was a different animal. And I had a bit of a job buying him, but I did get him, and he proved to be a pretty successful bull as well.
They're masters at the job, aren't they? They're growing the hair on the cattle and then turning them round. And you all learned a few lessons from them in their younger days, I'm sure.
He had a tremendous amount of hair on him anyway, but that was that. But he was a successful bull, and we went on. Bred a son of his, Powerhouses. It was the first champion I had at Stirling was Black Satan, which sold to Lady Glendyne for 8,000 on an October sale when the trade was absolutely horrendous. I was president of the society that year, and I was horrified by how bad the trade was. In fact, Rolly Fraser said at one point, bull after bull going through unsold, and Rolly Fraser said at one point, "Does anybody want an Aberdeen Angus bull?" And that was just about the lowest stage of the thing. But 8,000 was a good price for me at that time. But I was horrified with the rest of the trade, I must say.
And we'd be probably early 80s by then, Neil, I guess.
Yes, that was the early 80s, yeah.
But as you said, Powerhouse left you a Perth champion, but he left you more than one, I think, didn't he?
Oh, he was a very successful bull for us over the years, yeah. But the next bull we brought in was Southam Winchester in 1985, I think. And he was a very... I saw his photograph on a catalogue. And I phoned Jim Mowbray, who was a livestock agent out there, and asked if he was going to this sale. He said he was. And I said, if the bull looks anything like this photograph, buy him. Well, he was a mature bull. And but he bought him for $3,500. But I think it cost more than that to get him home. But he was an excellent bull, and one of the favourites of mine over the years. But I also bought a heifer at that time called Coldstream Lady Heather. And she established our Lady Heather line, and out of her, and mated with Winchester, we got Lord Horatio, who sold to Wedderley and Tofts and Haymount for 11,000 guineas. And so that Lady Heather family has bred a lot of Perth champions for us over the years.
So just going back to the South Home herd, you mentioned that John Graeme had been over there, and of course he'd bought the entire show team from the South Home herd sometime earlier. But
yes, well, that was in the early mid 70s. He would have done that. But he was the first man that really took in a powerful load of stuff, and it's had a huge influence now. It had. I mean, it had all been good. We bought a lot of bulls, not me entirely, but collectively, British breeders bought a lot of bulls that were very extreme. But they did a lot of good to our breed. Although they produced a lot of pretty horrible looking beasts sometimes. But we got milk back into the breed, which had been lost, and we got size back in. And since over the years, we began to get the shape back into them again, without a doubt, which has been very important for us, I think.
A long evolutional story, hasn't it? You've got to go back right up to the extremes to get them back in from the extremes they've gone to, of course.
I think that's what had happened then. Another very good bull I brought in, of course, was Royal Added Value.
Yes.
He came in '94, and he's maybe had a huge influence now. It had over the years. He wasn't a massive bull, but he was really a classy bull out of a very, very good cow. And well, we sold him to Shadwell eventually for far more than we bought him. And he went on to be, at 8 years old, I think, he was champion of the Royal Show for Shadwell.
That's right, and he bred, I think, a son for 16,000. Did he not, in Invasion?
Yeah, well, yeah, he did. That's correct. Yes, no, he left, but his females were the best bit of him. He left a lot of very good females, and a lot of milk into them too. You know, he was an important bull.
And did a lot of good for Shadwell as well as just the show ring.
Yeah, well, he by that time Shadwell were really beginning to motor and becoming a good herd, and he was an influential bull for them too. They had him for 2-3 years. Another bull we brought in just after, but that time was a bull called DMM Decision.
Yeah.
And I judged at Farm Fair that year, and he wasn't actually in the show. But my son Graeme was with me, and he had been looking around the show and seen this bull. And then he was horrified because he thought he was out of a red cow because he saw him standing in a pen. And we went to Miller's the next day or two, and he said he'd really liked this bull, but he was out of a red cow. I said, no, he's not out of a red cow. That had him standing in a different stall when they were mucking out his stall. So we bought him that year, and he did a lot of good to the herd too.
You bought him after the show, then, I guess?
Privately. He wasn't in the show, as it so happened.
Oh.
But he really turned into being a very, very good bull. And he bred, 1 year with 3-4 bull calves born, just one after the other. And they all went on to do very well. But there was a champion out of them, and another bulls that making quite big money at that time too. So he was another bull that did a lot of good for us.
And am I right in calculating that I think you've won 12 Perth and Stirling champions with Angus?
Yes, we've been very lucky over the years. Yeah, we have, and I think we've had 5 or 6 reserves as well. So we've been quite very lucky in that respect.
I don't think it's luck at all. You bought some good bulls to put your herd right, but that was only ever equalled, I think, by Jay Kerr from Harveston, and we spoke about him on this podcast a few months ago, and he had a longer spell at the job maybe than you did. But
he did also, but he had the disadvantage of only having one Perth sale a year. And I've been lucky with 2 Perth sales a year, so I got 2 chances at it, but he only got 1. But
that's very honest.
He was a very master breeder, Mr. Kerr. He was just kind of on the way out when I started, so I didn't have much meetings with him.
He certainly was top of the breed for something now on 60 years, I think. But then, having said that, you've had sort of a good 40 years at the top of it too. So.
Yeah, well, I've been 50 years here at Blelack now, over 50 years at Blelack, yeah.
And another bull, Angus bull, Blelack Ellerman, top price of Probably a modern day record at 28,000, was he? A modern day.
Well, I know it's yeah, no, I don't think it's a record, but it's been our best price certainly. Yes. We've had 25,000 a couple of times, and a bull called Lord Hidalgo by Royal Added Value. He was a very good bull. And Logie bought him, and he was one of the better ones we've bred too. Yeah.
And famous bull, Nether Allen Peter Pershaw, you bought him at Perth, I think, despite him not winning a prize.
Well, funny enough, they were selling up that year, and I'd gone down to look at the cattle there, and I saw this bull standing there, and he wasn't in very big form or anything. And I came home and said to Graeme, I think I've seen a bull that we should be buying. So we did buy him. He didn't have a ticket, certainly. When we got him for 10,000, I was surprised to have to pay so much, but somebody else liked him too. Sure. But he turned out to be very, very influential as well. Yeah.
He was full of Willie Robertson's breeding a Nightingale, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, he was, yes, and Willie kept telling me how much he'd done. Yeah, no, he was. No, Willie did very well in the job too, but he was full of with his breeding. Yeah, he was bought. He was out of an embryo that the chap had bought from Willie. He wasn't the best looking bull. There was just something about that bull, and he bred fantastically well. And I mean, we sold a hell of a lot of semen off him too. And I mean, I think there's been well on to 1,700 or 1,800 calves registered off him, I think. So.
Phenomenal bull.
In this breed, that's quite a lot,
His sons dominated the sales, didn't they? And he's in just about every pedigree, probably still is, in just about every pedigree figures.
Yeah, yes, I have, yeah. No, I think that's correct, yeah. No, he's did a powder good, yeah.
More recently, I've listed a bull, Blelack Duke, had a huge influence across the breed.
Well, he was a result of Graeme going out to the O'Neill ranch, and he stayed with Mr. O'Neill out there. Mr. Neil O'Neill, I'd met him at a sale in Canada, and he didn't hide his light under a bushel, did Mr. O'Neill. But he had good cattle, and Graeme had a very good week staying there, and he saw a bull called Antidote standing in the eye centre, which was one of their bulls. Graeme actually thought he was a Galloway because he had so much hair on him, but they said he was an Angus, so we bought semen off him, and then Graeme got a few of the O'Neill cows flushed, and Duke was the result of one of these flushes. Right. So he was very influential. And then, of course, when Graeme had his reduction sale in 2016, there was an O'Neill cow which had come on as an embryo here. It was the top price. She was the one that made 45,000. Right. Well, she made 35,000. Her bull calf made 10,000.
Yeah. And Duke did have an influence across the breed, didn't he? And I believe people still using him today, or trying to.
Yeah, no, he's been used quite widely. Yeah, we should have had more semen off him too, but he was a good bull. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you're going back to the female reduction sales, of which you had quite a few over the years, and Blelack animals put in the backbone in a lot of other herds. And
well, Graeme, since Graeme took over the job, he's always believed in moving stuff on and changing stuff around. So he had a sale in 2012 and another in 2016. Right. Mm-hmm. So that the 2016 one was the big sale, but we were very, very lucky that day. And one outfit came in and bought a huge number of them, and the Belleville herd, and they bought more than not almost half the sale, but well on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they made the sale that day.
And was it Blelack Erie that made 32,000 went to John Loftus? Would I be right?
Yes. That was a sale Graeme had on the farm in 2012.
Right.
And she made 32,000, but then she really did very, very well for John, and of course he flushed her to death and had lots of daughters and things off her. So John was a very influential man for a wee while in the breed, and was a great help to people by buying cattle and sell. He liked to trade cattle, John.
Certainly had a lot of good animals, and of course in his dispersal then it was I think a Blelack a blackbird line, was it, again through John Loftus, that was responsible for this year's Highland Showcase champion from Richard Hassel and Rachel Wiley.
That's right.
In fact, I think Blelack just about underpinned, or Breeding was behind just about all the winners on the show this year. So it's...
Well, at the Yorkshire too, apparently we had a bull that was sold to Donald Rankin last year, was the male champion there, so and reserve overall to the Hassel heifer. So we had a clean sweep, yes. But mind you, there've been bigger shows than there were this year, of course. The way the things turned out. Mm-hmm.
True enough. And you had your share in the show ring yourself. Of course, you did show for a while. I think you gave it up back in 2000 when you sort of get the showing, but you were...
Well, I kind of gave up the showing. We've had a bit of luck at the Highland and the Royal. We've had champions at both, maybe more than one. But Graeme took it up again when his daughter Hayley was kind of keen for a wee while, and so we had a bit of showing at the Highland then, and with a bull called Blelack that won at the Highland that year. So we've had a bit of luck at the Highland, yeah. But we haven't shown regularly there.
I remember first meeting you, Neil, when we were in the sheep, and you were pretty hot in the Rouge breed going back. There was you had a few breeds, I think.
I wouldn't say we were hot. We did have Rouge for a while. I don't think I was cut out to be a shepherd. But we had a week go at the Blues as well, but we were too late into them really, and I wouldn't say we made a great fist of either of them. Graeme was in Suffolk for a wee while, and he was great friends with the late Gordon Wilson, and he kind of bought some old ewes from Gordon to start with, but he rapidly lost enthusiasm after Gordon died. And decided to sell them, and I was in Canada at the time he sold them in Carlisle. And he said he'd the happiest half hour he'd had for a long time because they made quite a lot of money, and that was due to the influence of Gordon, not us.
Gordon was a very able man. I remember him well. I think he was just getting into Texels just before he died as well. Which
he was.
His brothers involved in.
Well, that's right. His brothers made a big job of them too. Yeah.
And the Rouge and the Blues are coming back, Neil, and maybe a chance to get back into them again.
Yeah, well, we're probably too late, but if they're any good at all, Charlie Borden will be in, so it'll be all right.
I'm saying nothing to that one. Let's move swiftly on to the Charolais cattle. And we spoke about some of the early Charolais on the previous podcast, and it was agreed by everybody, I think, that Tattenhall Impeccable was probably one of the most influential bulls of all time. And you had a son of his, Mary Victorious. In fact, wasn't he an E.T. carver, if I remember right? Mary
Victorious, but we had, prior to him, the first really influential Charolais bull about was Davy Lysander. Okay. Now, he was a very good-looking bull. I went to herd of the two of the herds, and I tried to buy him, and Robert de Pass, who said no, he couldn't sell him because he'd already got a late entry into the Bingley Hall sale with him, so he'd have to go there. So I said, that was fine. But unfortunately, that was the week after an October sale in Stirling, and I got a hellish bad dose of the flu. Right. And James Anderson of Burnton, I'd asked him if he would like a share in this bull. And he said, if it looked all right, he would have a go. But so he went to the sale himself, and he phoned me at night and said, there'll be no use to the bull's champion. I said, he must be quite good then. So he said, I said, what do we put into him? He said, 5,000 was his top. And I said, well, go to 15 if you have to, and we'll split that. I'll just pay the rest. But anyway, we got him for 12, and he just paid the half. So he was very successful, but he did even more for James than me, because he got 28,000 for a bull to go to Ireland off of the first lot of calves off him. I did quite well off him, but not as good as James did. And then he went on to be Highland Show champion to Davy Lysander. So he was a good bull, and I've got a wonderful picture of him in my office, painted by a nice lady. But Mary Victorious was the most successful. But I was judged that day at Stirling when I bought him, and I got him for 5,500, which was the second top price of the sale. But it was the last year before the Charolais prices took off. So I was pretty lucky. And Esmer Evans keeps telling me how lucky I was. So, but he was a very influential bull and bred very well. His first crop of calves, I think, averaged over 5,000 or 6,000, I think. So he did very well.
And That's in the early 80s, as you said before, the breed
Yes.
really caught fire. And
Well, that's right.
I looked him up, and I think there were 1,300 pedigree cows registered off him. So that's some going. There's a lot of semen out there too.
Well, that's right. Well, a interesting little story there. We did sell a lot of semen off him, but I opened up to see what the hell I was selling. I opened up an account at the bank, just put the proceeds of the semen into that. And my wife went into one day to in some checks, and she said to the girl, "Put this into the semen account," which caused a little bit of merriment in the bank that day, I think. So anyway, the semen account did quite well for a year or two.
Yeah, good. And other bulls, I'm not quite so up on the history of the Charolais at Blelack. What other bulls had influenced the herd after that?
Well, we used one or two homebred bulls too, like really over the years.
And Neil, you've won 3 champions at Perth with Charolais, I think, and sold bulls to 25,000, 22,000.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we had a very good bull, which made 21,000. But the 25,000 bull was not the best bull we ever bred, but he was the best price. But the 21,000 bull was a really good bull, and he went unfortunately, and just I was away at a sale at Carlisle, and they phoned me up and said the bull had jumped a fence and been caught, and they thought he'd broken his leg.
Okay.
Well, when I got home, I discovered it wasn't broken, but it wasn't. He was very lame. Took him down to the Dick vet, and he was there for 3 weeks, and then he went on to be Perth champion after that, which was quite impressive.
Indeed. And moving on, you also started a herd of shorthorns at Blelack. Maybe that was a little bit more of Graeme's influence, was it? There with some.
Well, that was Graeme's influence, but we didn't keep them that long. I think we should have kept them longer because the shorthorn breed has made a big comeback. But we bought some. The first ones we bought from Chris Madler down in south of England. Chris was a great enthusiast for shorthorns, so we bought from him originally, and we added 1 or 2 to them. But we never got terribly serious with them. But we showed them at the Highland, and we had a heifer that was junior champion at the Highland show. So that was quite good. And we had a bull that we bought, and he went on to the Highland Show champion. So he was a good bull too. So we were just getting into the thing, and Graeme decided when he had his 16 sale that he was going to reduce things, and he sold the shorthorns as well. We sold them all to one man, so that was just quite a good deal too. No, they did all right for us, and as I say, I think the shorthorns have a big comeback. We should have kept them.
I was going to say, did you envisage seeing them as strong as they are now? Because you're right, they're hot property just at the moment, aren't they?
Well, they are, yeah. No, at the time we went in, they were just beginning to start off, and we paid at sales. We paid 5,000 twice for cows, I think, and that at that time was a pretty big sale for shorthorns, really.
Yeah,
because they'd fallen away really pretty badly. Of course, they had the influence of the main Anjou in them for a year or 2 as well.
Yes.
Bill Bruce at Balmile had a very good herd of shorthorns, which was really based on main Anjou. But they were very impressive cattle.
Some of the Canadian blood, of course, would have come in. There'd be a slightly different beast coming in from Canada, I guess.
Well, that's right, yeah. Well, I remember when the Canadian ones came in first, Mary Darno of Upper Mill, she was horrified at these beasts. They would never have them, but after a year or 2, she had them as well. So, you know.
Similar story to the Angus, I suppose, when they'd got them into the state that they had in the 60s, and maybe the breed didn't right itself quite as quickly as the Angus did.
Probably not, but they had really dropped off into very small numbers, and now they're almost as strong as the Angus in number-wise, I mean. And they're selling more and more bulls each year. They were down to selling only a handful of bulls, and this last sale or 2, they've sold quite a lot of bulls.
Yeah.
And a lot of people going into shorthorns. I mean, it's a very easy kept breed and suit a lot of people.
I mentioned the Highland Show just now. How many champions at the Highland Show would you have taken over the years, Neil?
3 or 4, I think, is the maximum we've had at the Highland. But one had at the Royal as well. We've never shown to Yorkshire, but as I say, we haven't never really been that interested in summer showing. But we've done a bits and pieces, but not really too bothered with it. No.
If you can sell the cattle on and let other people show them for you, then that does the talking for you, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, but we probably should show more than we do. But It's a field that I was never just very excited about. No, prefer to breed cattle to breed,
And moving on to the now, then Graeme's been running the farm for a while now, as you said, and he took the decision to sell the majority of the cows in 2016. Is that because his children weren't interested in going into farming? Would that be?
They weren't interested in going into farming. Haley enjoyed showing cattle, but that was it. Like, she wouldn't want to be a farmer. She was quite good at showing cattle, but she didn't want to. So we did a bit of showing when she was younger and keen to do it. Now she's away and hasn't time, and Jack isn't keen on farming at all. So yeah, I knew it was going to be sold sometime. I wasn't expecting it to be sold in my lifetime, but Graeme's had a bit of ill health, and he says he's not so fit to do the job, and he's not. And there's a great difficulty in getting really good men these days. I mean, there are good men around, but they're very expensive. So, and frankly, the price of bulls really hasn't risen as it should have done over the years. I mean, we were selling bulls at the prices we are now 10 to 20 years ago, really. So, they haven't moved nearly enough, I don't think. The other thing, of course, is that there are really too many people breeding pedigree cattle and trying to sell bulls now when you see the size of the suckler herd reducing all the time.
Yeah. I think the same can be said with the sheep. We've had this conversation with a few people in the sheep. The same thing. Everybody's buying sheep and trying to produce tops, and there's just not enough females to go in.
No, if you can produce the right tops, it seems to be better to be in sheep than cattle, I would say.
There's a lot of wastage, I'm sure. A lot of wastage, but a lot of flushing too, and a lot of cost.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
And going back to that dispersal, and I think the Charolais were completely dispersed, I'd be right, in 2016. 43 lots, averaged nearly 5,000, and again, they went and put the backbones in a lot of other herds.
Well, yeah, we were a little unfortunate with the sale of them because it was just the time that they were speaking about having smaller carcasses and things, and the edge was off the Charolais for a wee minty. So we'd sold his autumn calving lot in Carlisle 2 years before, and we averaged over 7,000 for them. So there was a bit of a reduction just at that time. It was sold the same day as our very successful Angus sale, and we couldn't say we were disappointed because we'd got so much for the Angus, but I was a bit disappointed what the Charolais made that day.
You did sell the stock bull for 30,000, though.
Well, that's right. Well, we were lucky again there. You see, just Major Walter was kind of keen on him, I think, and Danny Surridge, so that made him a good. We did very well with the stock bulls because he made 30,000, and the other one made 13, and I think we paid 6 for it, so it was a good deal. And he bred well, and the third one with 3 stock bulls, he went away to 8,000 or something. So the stock bulls did very well, yes.
That doesn't always work. And you mentioned the Angus herd. Most was dispersed that year, I think, and that was a big trade, somewhere up near 7,000. Did you say for the average for the Angus? But you still kept a few younger Angus then. So.
We kept all the young ones,
right?
And we've built them up quite quickly again. And he's dispersing in October. Well, he'll have between 60 and 70 cows and calves to sell, and I think there are 30 yearling heifers being bulled, so and a few maidens. So there'll be 120 lots probably altogether.
Okay.
So it's built up quite quickly again.
Yeah.
I think the herd is maybe every bit as strong as it was then, with a lot of very good cattle to put in the market.
Good.
So we'll see how it goes when the time comes.
And that's in sterling in October, did you say?
Selling at the October sale, yes.
Yeah. And yourself, Neil, you're still involved in the cattle. You're still going to keep an eye over them every day and keep active amongst them.
I keep annoying them. Yes, I go up every morning and well, I think I do good. I'm not sure, but I enjoy it. And I don't know what I'm going to do when they go, but we'll have to find something to fill in the days. But I don't usually go up in the afternoon unless there's something especially on. But this time of year I love it because I do all the fields and see all the cattle, so I enjoy doing that. And in the winter time I play about with bulls and things, and that's been my life for a long time.
Yeah.
But I've been very fortunate. I've twice been president of the Angus Society, and I've been chairman of the Charolais Society, so I've been very lucky. I had
and your other son, of course, Mike, runs a herd of Charolais and Limousins as well, very successful.
Mike has built up very good herds of both. His Charolais are doing that particularly well at the moment, and he says it's very hard to get into the type of Limousins that are making the most money because they're commanding big fees, but he's done very well with both breeds, and he's an incredibly hard worker, so he deserves all the success he's been getting. So, and I hope he keeps them going. But he just lives a little bit far away from me to go and see him every day. So.
Sure. And the farm Blelack itself is up for sale now. And will the Blelack prefix go with that?
No, highly unlikely, because it's not likely that somebody's going to buy the whole herd of it. If somebody's buying the whole herd, you'd put the prefix with it, but no, I'm afraid not.
Wouldn't go with a sale, no, with a farm.
No. Well, unless somebody's wanting to start an Angus herd, but they would have to apply to the society, I think, to get it. So. Okay. If you sell a whole herd, you can sell the prefix with it, I think. Okay. Certainly the upper mill did that with the shorthorns. So.
Well, Neil, I certainly wish you well with it. You've received an OBE and the Sir William Young Award for livestock breeding, and hugely successful achievement in building one of the most successful prefixes probably of all time. And the name Blelack will live on for a long time in history books, and I appreciate you talking to me.
Well, thank you very much. I've been very fortunate, and I've been lucky to get these awards. I mean, sometimes you wonder why you're picked to get them, but it's nice when it happens, and it's quite good. But I've thoroughly enjoyed my time in the Angus breed and in the Charolais breed too, and even in the shorthorns. Cattle breeding's been my passion my whole life. As I said, we'd have dabble in sheep, but I don't think I was cut out to be a shepherd. So, I think we'll leave that to the people that are better at it.
I'd like to wish Graeme a happy retirement too. Tells me he's not retiring.
He's certainly not retiring. He's far too young to retire. Good God. What would he do? He's got to get himself something else to do, but he will. He's going to have a little sabbatical, he says, so we'll see what.
I thought I'd retired 10 years ago, and I work harder now than I ever did when I was working before. So
see, look at that, Andy. There it is. Oh, well, but you're doing a good job, and thank you very much for having us on. Okay,
Neil, that's very kind of you, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much, Andy. Bye just now.
Bye now. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast, which was kindly sponsored by Harbro, suppliers of quality commercial and pedigree feeds and expert nutritional advice. Visit their website or find them on Facebook for more information. And while on the subject of Facebook, why don't you visit the Top Lines and Tails Facebook page, where you'll find photographs and more information to back up this episode.